Hey, yo, what up? It's your boy. Who are the greatest anime characters of all time? Obviously, everybody has their own personal favorites, whether that be main characters, side characters, villains, waifus, husbandos, you name it. But it seems like there are some publications out there who try their absolute best to make that question a reality. And sometimes some of those places just happen to be some pretty infamous websites, like today's website, IGN. That's right, everybody's favorite gaming review website, IGN, has decided to try and compile a list of the greatest anime characters of all time. We're going to be looking through this list to see just how well IGN has hit the nail on the head, or how much that they have hit the nail into the coffin. Obviously, I'm going into this list with a large dose of skepticism, considering the fact that I once reviewed IGN's top 10 anime list, just like the greatest anime of all time according to IGN. But today it is all about the top 25 greatest anime characters of all time. Sorry, that little title right there is cut off a little bit, but it says greatest anime characters of all time. I'll leave the link to this list down in the description below so you can check it out for yourself, but I'm going to go through it, see what IGN thinks is the best anime characters of all time. Before we get to our list, here are a few ground rules on how we landed on this selection. Each character has been selected for their lasting impact, their place in anime history, and of course, how much we love them here at IGN. Okay, so there's a number of factors going into here. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of subjectivity here, as mentioned at the end of this sentence right here, but also two big criteria that IGN really focused on when creating this list is a lasting impact and their place in anime histories. I feel like they had to write that there at the beginning because the word greatest is very different depending on how you want to pick up on that definition. So without further ado, let's jump into it, shall we? Starting off with number 25, Astro Boy, which I'm going to be honest with you, I did not expect whatsoever. And I am actually pretty happy with the inclusion of Astro Boy here, because if there is one thing I really, I guess, just dislike or just leaves a bad taste in my mouth when it comes to the way that Astro Boy is treated in the broader anime community, especially online, is that a lot of people just immediately discredit Astro Boy for just being like an older series or like one of the first anime series ever made, because yes, in reality, you know, it is true. Like, although technically speaking, it is not the first anime to ever come out, it is most certainly the earliest example of an anime series that left a massive impact in the broader anime community and the future of anime. I mean, you know, that whole thing of like how anime characters have those like giant eyes. This was the character that started that trope. This guy is the reason why anime characters have their distinctive looks. And the fact that 60 years later, exactly 60 years later actually, because Astro Boy came out in 1963, which is fucking insane to think about. But look, as someone who had a massive appreciation for Astro Boy, obviously, because I obviously read the manga, I watched a little bit of the anime, obviously not all iterations of the anime, but I have and always been a massive Tezuka Osamu fan, although I don't think Astro Boy is Tezuka's best work. That work obviously goes to Phoenix, in my opinion. There is absolutely no denying that Astro Boy is the GOAT. It is the greatest of all time. Anime would be nothing it is today, and I think that really does deserve the credit and is a perfectly valid reason why I think all anime fans should, at the very least, respect Astro Boy for what it did. This guy is the reason why I even have a career, and so many anitubers online have a career, and so many people in the world have a hobby, which is anime in the first place. And to throw this guy out of the conversation because it's the obvious pick or the oldest one ever, I think is a really shit poor excuse. Although I would put Astro Boy a lot fucking higher on this list, just purely based on the criteria that IGN gave themselves for the lasting impact of everything. I think Astro Boy should at least be in the top 10, in my personal opinion. But you know what? We can't have everything. I'm just happy that this motherfucker is even on the list to begin with. At number 24 is Vash the Stampede from Trigun, which, I actually don't really agree with. Although I am a massive, massive fan of Trigun, I love the original series. Trigun Stampede, the Studio Orange remake, was incredible. Such an amazing rework of the original Trigun story. I don't agree with Vash the Stampede being like the greatest anime character, although he's a great anime character in his own series. Trigun didn't really, on the grander scale of things, like reinvent the wheel or anything when it comes to anime storytelling. Vash the Stampede wasn't like the most like unique character out there in the grander scheme of anime. And although he is a fan favorite for a lot of people, and you know, Vash the Stampede and Trigun itself is a fan favorite for a lot of people, I don't really think it has like lived on throughout the ages. Like, people who kind of grew up watching the original Trigun or decided to watch Trigun Stampede as a first introduction to Trigun will probably recognize, I guess, the important aspects of Trigun as a series. But at the end of the day, was kind of just another sci-fi story from the 90s. Like, it really didn't do anything to like change the landscape of anime as a whole, and Vash as a character didn't really bring anything like completely new to the table. Like, I think a very good indicator, right, of being on this list, in my opinion, if I were to make a list like this, I think one really important thing is when people think of anime, do they immediately think of Vash the Stampede? Probably not. I mean, look, maybe like after about a half hour, you know, going back to your childhood series, you might bring up Vash the Stampede and Trigun, but I think for a lot of people, Trigun was just one of those like standout shows for its era, but I don't necessarily think it like lived on the legacy. If this was like maybe like a top 100 list, sure, I would probably put Vash somewhere in like the bottom 50, but in number 24, above Astro Boy, I don't think so. Number 23 is Lelouch from Code Geass. Now look, I think Lelouch does deserve to be on this list. I think Code Geass as a series is incredibly influential, and it really did cause a cultural splash. The fact that after all this time of it airing, people still cite Code Geass as one of their favorite stories ever told, not just in anime, but just in storytelling mediums in general. Personally, I absolutely fucking adored Code Geass. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Although the visuals, let's say, per se, didn't really age tremendously well, I think just Lelouch as a character, and especially the way that his character develops throughout the 2 seasons of Code Geass, I think he definitely did leave a larger impact on the world of anime than, say, Vash the Stampede. But at number 23, man, it's really hard to determine. Look, I'm not upset at the fact that he's on this list, and I do love Lelouch as a character, but I just don't really know if, again, he should be above Astro Boy. It's the moment Astro Boy was thrown into number 25, it really just did fuck up the rest of the list, because there's probably going to be a bunch of other characters on here who are above Astro Boy who, let's be real, when talking about the long-lasting legacy and the impact it brought to the industry, should not be above Astro Boy. Okay, number 22 is Light Yagami from Death Note. I actually agree with this one. I think, although, you know, Death Note is an incredibly popular show and is the gateway anime for a lot of people, especially in the 2000s, I think Death Note and Light as a character deserves all of the praises and glories that he gets. Now, do I think Light is the most interesting character in Death Note? Not necessarily. I would actually probably give that to L or even like Ryuk. I think like the way that, look, obviously Light as a character, his development and his complete 180 shift in personality does change from the beginning to the end, which is what makes Death Note so interesting. There were some other more redeeming qualities to a character like L, for instance, where I think just on the grander scale of things, most Death Note fans will agree that they do prefer L as a character, and L is a lot more of an interesting character and a lot more of a memorable character than Light was. Now, am I saying that Light is a bad character or an unmemorable character? Absolutely not. Light is a fantastically written character. And so that's why, like, you know, as much as I'm being like very nitpicky with this kind of stuff, because I kind of have to, it's kind of the whole point of this video. I am actually pretty happy with Light being on this list, and you know, he did miss out on the top 20, but I personally think he should be in the top 20. But hey, I'm happy he's on the list. We'll take a dub when we can get a dub. Okay, number 21 is Dio Brando from JoJo. Again, another character that I highly agree with. I think Dio should be a lot higher, if I'm being honest with you. I think he should be in the top 20 or even maybe even the top 15, because he really did, I guess, change the landscape of what an antagonist should be in an anime of this kind. See, because anime, especially around this time, at the beginning of this time when JoJo was first coming out in its manga form, which is around like the early 80s, there was the kind of this trend, and obviously further along after JoJo came out as well, has always been this trend in anime of anime characters needing to have some kind of a justification, right? Needing to have some kind of like moral reasoning within themselves that the viewers can then see for themselves as a third person and either sympathize or empathize or try to understand why this antagonist became the way that they did. Whereas in the case with Dio, no, this motherfucker was just evil for the sake of evil. Like literally from chapter 1 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, you see this evil guy just wanting to cause havoc, just wanting to piss off Jonathan and the Joestar family, and just have all of these super ill intents towards anyone and everything that stands in his way. And I think there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. If anything, that is, I feel, one of the more rare circumstances that you would find in anime villains, because, you know, as much as having some kind of like, again, moral reason to be bad or to be the bad guy in an anime story, there's nothing wrong with that. And if anything, that creates for some of the most interesting antagonists written in anime. Sometimes just having an evil motherfucker for the sake of being an evil motherfucker is also a really refreshing thing, and I think that's what Dio brought to the table. Now, am I saying that Dio is the first anime character or the first character or antagonist in storytelling to be in this position? No, probably not. I can't think of anyone who came before Dio, but there's probably a number of them that I'm sure somebody will let me know down in the comments below. But when it comes to the long-lasting impact of Dio as a character, especially the fact that, you know, with the recent success of the anime adaptation, you know, Dio has been around, is a character now that's been around for 40 years, basically. And even after 40 years, people are still recognizing Dio, still, you know, quoting the quotables because JoJo is such a quotable show, and still understanding that sometimes you don't need a good reason to be the bad guy. Sometimes you are just the bad guy to be the bad guy. I think is a great thing, and I think, again, is kind of a refreshing take. So yeah, I totally agree. Dio, I think, should be a lot higher. Should definitely be in the top 10, I would say, most memorable characters. Definitely one of the most memorable JoJo characters, for sure. So yeah, pretty happy with this one. Okay, number 20 is Gon from Hunter x Hunter. I don't know about this one. Look, as someone who recently just caught up to Hunter x Hunter, which again, I've done a whole video on this channel talking about me finally catching up to Hunter x Hunter after all these years, and now understanding the full context of the Hunter x Hunter series and all the characters in it. I don't think Gon is even the most interesting character in the show. I think there are so many other characters that are way more interesting in the show, especially a lot of the bad guys as well. You know, like Meruemu, I think, is an incredibly well-written character, an incredibly interesting character. Again, kind of in the same vein as Dio, just a bad guy just wanting to be the bad guy who, unlike Dio, puts himself into a circumstance, or gets put into a circumstance, where he realizes his mortality, realizes the wrongs in his behaviors, and ends it the way it does. Obviously, I'm not going to say it in this video in case you've never read Hunter x Hunter, but I think Gon as a character just is not necessarily the most like deep or profound or like interesting character in any way. Like, especially in the first half of Hunter x Hunter, he's kind of boring, if I'm being honest, and it's not really until like the Chimera Ant arc where he actually starts to become a little bit more of an interesting character. If we had to put a character from Hunter x Hunter, I'd be more inclined to put like Killua, or, you know, even like Hisoka, or, you know, there's a ton of other characters who are just more memorable and more interesting in the long run. At the end of the day, Gon is just kind of another shonen protagonist, if I'm being completely honest with you. There's no shit towards like Hunter x Hunter as a series or like Gon as a character. I think in the confines of the Hunter x Hunter series, Gon is a perfectly fine character. But if we're talking in the grander scale of anime characters, Gon is not, I would not put Gon in the top 25. Okay, number 19 is Sanagi Moto from Ghost in the Shell. Look, I love Motoko. Love Ghost in the Shell. If we were talking about the top 25 greatest anime series of all time, I would most definitely put Ghost in the Shell in the top 25. At the time it came out, it was incredibly refreshing, incredibly influential. The fact that there are so many cyberpunk, post-apocalyptic, technology-driven series that came out post Ghost in the Shell that directly influenced Ghost in the Shell, or say they are directly influenced by series like Ghost in the Shell, I think is telling of this series' stay power. And I love Motoko as a character, and especially in the later seasons and the later chapters of the manga, she does really put herself into some like interesting situations. The ghost in the shell, as the name suggests, her spirit being inside of an android body, and that causing all sorts of existential issues and identity issues that Motoko goes through in the events of Ghost in the Shell, and that's what makes the whole series in itself super interesting. I wouldn't say she's the most like memorable thing about Ghost in the Shell. If anything, I would say there aren't really any like characters, like specific characters that invoke or the thought of Ghost in the Shell. I think Ghost in the Shell is one of those series that people love the vibe of, and I think the vibe of the show and the themes surrounding the show is what makes the show so influential and so interesting to a lot of people, and not necessarily like the individual characters in the show, if you get what I mean. Love Motoko, but I wouldn't put her at number 19. Again, over fucking Astro Boy or like Light Yagami. I just wouldn't do that. Okay, number 18 is Levi from Attack on Titan. Look, I love Levi, love Attack on Titan. I don't think, though, Levi is the most interesting character in Attack on Titan. I'm sorry. I just don't think he is. He's a great character, don't get me wrong. And, the growth that he goes through in the entire series of Attack on Titan is amazing to witness. And he is responsible for some of my favorite fucking action scenes in modern day anime. Is he the most interesting character in the series? That's up for debate. He's most certainly a fan favorite, but just because someone is a fan favorite, I don't think it should necessarily equate to them being the greatest in the grander scheme of anime. You get what I mean? Especially, again, when we're strictly following the credentials that IGN put onto themselves with this list, like characters that have long-standing respect, and they're going to be characters that we'll be talking about for the rest of the time. I think Attack on Titan as a series will be a series that people will talk about for the rest of, as long as anime is around, and is deemed by many people as a modern classic today. But I think, again, it's like Ghost in the Shell. It's not because of like a single character, or it's not because of like a single standout character that makes Attack on Titan so good. The most difficult thing with putting any Attack on Titan character on a list like this is that there are so many characters that could easily have been put in this position other than Levi, and all of them would have been just as valid as putting Levi on this list. If we're talking like in a top 100 sense, sure, I would absolutely put Levi on there. But like, what about like Erwin, or like, even like, as much as people didn't like Armin in the final season, like I also think Eren is an incredibly memorable character. The way that his character growth is absolutely fucking insane. And yes, although a lot of people did not like Eren, especially in season 1, for how much of a whiny bitch he was, which is a valid point, I think just the way that the character has grown and has really shifted the way that Attack on Titan as a series played out, I think is a little bit more influential than Levi. I definitely do think Levi is one of the best side characters in the series, but do I think he's the greatest character in all of Attack on Titan and the 18th greatest character in all of anime? That's a no from me, dog. Okay, number 17 is Kakashi from Naruto. I mean, I was expecting there to be a Naruto character of some kind. I'm actually surprised it's not Naruto himself that's in this position, and instead is Kakashi, which I'm not upset about. I'm definitely not upset about. I think, you know, again, as much as personally I wasn't like a huge fan of Naruto, I thought the series was good for sure. I don't think it's like the greatest anime ever made, like how a lot of Naruto fans will put it, but I think Kakashi for sure is the most interesting character in Naruto. Like, hands down. I think, you know, there is a reason why he is like constantly being cosplayed, constantly being talked about. His backstory, although was very long-winded in the manga, I think was definitely one of the most interesting and most memorable. And again, the fact that there are so many shonen series that came out after Naruto that have characters that are very synonymous to Kakashi, and characters like Kakashi, I think goes to show just how much of an impact he put onto the shonen space in general. So yeah, I'm actually not upset at all. I actually think this is a good choice. If we were going to put one Naruto character, I would have also put Kakashi in here, and I'm not upset with him being in 17. I think this is a totally fine placement. Number 16, we have Guts from Berserk. Thank fuck. I swear to God, if they weren't going to put a Berserk character in here, I would have flipped my fucking desk. But thank God, the people at IGN have a brain. Good job, guys. You cannot have a conversation about the greatest blank of anime without putting or mentioning Berserk in it in some way or another. There is a reason why it is A, one of my favorite manga series of all time, B, many people's favorite manga series of all time, and C, just one of the best dark fantasy stories ever written, manga or not. I think just goes to show how much of an impact this series brought onto the world of just dark fantasy in general. And Guts as a character is by far, in my opinion, one of the best just fantasy protagonists of all time. Like, the way that this character is written is so incredibly deep, and when you really do get to explore the kind of, when you get past the whole like, oh, he's just like a big buff guy who, you know, wants to kill the guy who betrayed him and, you know, took his girl and just wants to wreak havoc in the world with his giga giant mega sword, when you actually start to explore the real human side of Berserk and the real like somber, touching moments of Berserk, and understand what exactly Guts is as a character in the context of Berserk, it really does go to show you just how much Miura Kentaro was thinking about the characters of Berserk. And honestly, with Berserk, it's such a hard pick. I mean, you could have easily put Griffith on here. Casca maybe not so much. Look, I love Casca, don't get me wrong, no diss to Casca, but like, you know, definitely her best moment was during the Golden Arc period, let's be real. But Guts is just continuously, throughout the entire serialization of Berserk, is just such a fascinating character to see. And again, is an incredibly influential show and an incredibly influential character. I am very okay with the placement of Guts, so good job, IGN, you did a good job. Wow, number 15 is Lupin. Arsene Lupin III. Wow, okay. Look, you know what? I respect IGN for putting some of the oldies but goldies on here. We had Astro Boy, now we have Lupin III. Again, another anime series that gets thrown out of the conversation so goddamn much because it's the obvious pick. Yes, it's the obvious pick, but for good reason. This show is incredibly influential, and people who have not seen Lupin III, even like just watching a couple of the movies, you will know just how incredibly influential this show is in so many different aspects of anime. I mean, you know, action comedy genre would be nothing without Lupin III. And again, Lupin is one of those series where the deeper you go into it, you do start to understand just why it is so influential, because again, much like Berserk, it does this fantastic job of really humanizing the characters, really making sure that you understand why the characters act and talk and operate in the ways that they do. But if you don't want to focus on that, you can always just focus on the fun action comedy as well. It really is the best of both worlds. And I think Lupin, just especially in Japan, if you ask Japanese people who are some of the most influential and greatest anime characters of all time, they will be very quick to point out Lupin, because you cannot have a conversation about the goats of anime without throwing Lupin into it. So I am totally okay with this placement. I would have even honestly put him in the top 10 if I'm being honest with you, but maybe that's just my Lupin love showing. But this is a fantastic entry, fantastic series, and if you have never seen Lupin III before, you know nothing about Lupin III, do yourself a favor, go and watch Lupin III Castle of Cagliostro. It is, in my opinion, one of the best anime films to ever come out, and was actually directed by Hayao Miyazaki. Yes, that Hayao Miyazaki, Ghibli founder Hayao Miyazaki, before he founded Ghibli, and he does a fantastic job with it as well. So do yourself a favor, go and watch that, go and consume some Lupin III, because it is fantastic. Kujo Jotaro above Dio? No, I'm sorry. Look, I love Jojo, I love Jotaro, and so much of part 3 I absolutely love, but as a character, dude, no. I don't, like, let's be real, Jotaro isn't even the best character in part 3. That obviously goes to Polnareff, like, and Dio, if we're being honest. And the fact that on this list, they decided to put Jotaro, like, 5 placements over Dio? No, that's absurd. That's insane. I absolutely do not agree with this pick. Jotaro, at the end of the day, he's just he's literally just like a macho. Like, honestly, you know what Jotaro is? Jotaro is literally just every side character, every, like, just not that interesting side character from Fist of the North Star, just all combined into one. That's all he is. Like, he's literally just Fist of the North Star Kenshiro, but way less interesting. And, you know, again, no like hate towards part 3 or anything like that, although the second half of part 3, like, especially like the Egypt part of part 3, was just an absolute slog to read through at some moments. But, you know, at least the final fight and everything was kind of epic. But just Jotaro as a character, he's not even the best character in part 3. He's not even the best JoJo. Like, why did you not put Joseph in here? Like, Joseph is by far a more interesting character than Jotaro is. And again, I feel like the only reason why people remember Jotaro is because of Dio. Like, if Dio was not Jotaro's antagonist during that part, Jotaro would be really forgettable. And I think the entire strength of part 3 is because of Dio. So Dio should be a lot higher. I would not even put Jotaro in like the top 50 if I'm being honest, but hey, that's just me. Okay, number 13 is Zoro from One Piece. You know, this is a preference. Again, I was expecting there to be a One Piece character. I'm surprised it's not Luffy, but instead it's Zoro here at number 13. But, you know, I love Zoro. Don't get me wrong. He's a great fucking character. But again, like, I think with One Piece, there are more interesting characters, especially some of the antagonists in One Piece are just a little bit more interesting. It's really difficult to just pick one character from One Piece as the greatest because, again, it's one of those shows where, like, it's the entire show and the entire cast of the characters that makes One Piece so legendary and incredible to read through, and it's not really because of one single character, you know. And I think, you know, even within the Straw Hat crew, personally speaking, my favorite character in the Straw Hat crew is Sanji. I just fuck with Sanji a little bit more. I think he's just a little bit cooler and a little bit more badass, has a little bit more of an interesting backstory as well when you first get to meet him. He's just a little bit more of a fun character to read along with. Again, no hate towards Zoro. Fucking love Zoro. Great character. Incredibly influential swordsman, I guess, in the world of anime. But at number 13, maybe not. Oh, of course. Of course you had to put this on here. Of course we had to see a Demon Slayer character on here. At least it's not the other fucking characters, but Jesus Christ, man. No. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Demon Slayer fans. Tanjiro at number 12 is absurd. Let's just be real. It is absurd. Because at the end of the day, Tanjiro is just another shonen protagonist. He is not interesting in the slightest. A lot of his personality are just carbon copies of previous shonen characters, like ones in Hunter. Like, he's literally the modern day Gon when it comes to the type of character that he is. Let's be real. Like, instead of a fist, now he has a sword. But it is very obvious that Tanjiro as a character, there are so many characters like Tanjiro in the shonen world. There are so many protagonists like Tanjiro in the shonen and anime world. And if it wasn't for just the success of Demon Slayer as a series, I don't think people will be talking about Tanjiro, because he didn't bring anything new to the table. Again, he's not even the most memorable character in Demon Slayer. Again, much like One Piece, the biggest characters, or the most memorable characters in Demon Slayer, are the side characters and the characters that are not the main character. You know, like Tanjiro's kind of just there to keep the whole thing together. He's kind of like the glue of the series, but he is not the pillar that holds the series together. Again, him being above characters like Lupin and Gon is just absurd. So this is a no from me. I'm sorry, Demon Slayer fans. So Tanjiro should not be a number 12. Okay, there we go. Here is a character that I was mentioning earlier that should be up here. L from Death Note. I absolutely agree. Is number 11 a little bit high? Maybe. But I think he is, again, a lot more of an interesting and memorable character than Light. And I am really glad that IGN is not just limiting this to just, one character per series and stuff like that, which is good. Now that I think about it, might suggest that we will see more characters from One Piece and Naruto and all that kind of stuff. So we'll see how the top 10 goes, but I think L, being in this conversation in the top 25 is valid. I think it is valid, and he is a great little weird, super memorable, super just intriguing character to read along with. And again, he brought on a characteristic trope that a lot of anime characters and side characters and antagonists have used past the serialization of Death Note. So yeah, I think L deserves to be in this list for sure. All right, moving on to the top 10, we have Himura Kenshin from Roni Kenshin. Now, remember when I was mentioning about Tanjiro from Demon Slayer being a carbon copy of previous swordsman main characters from shonen manga? Here is a great example of it, because if you have read Roni Kenshin, you will know that so much of Himura Kenshin is also in Tanjiro and vice versa. Tanjiro is literally the modern day version of Himura Kenshin. I think just as a series and as a story in general, Roni Kenshin was just a little bit more interesting. I think Kenshin was a lot more of an interesting character than Tanjiro, especially with the way that his character progressed after all the events that happened in Roni Kenshin. And he's just more of a likable character, in my opinion. Just Kenshin, you want to root for Kenshin. You know what I mean? There is not a moment in Roni Kenshin where you are not rooting for Kenshin, because he's such a likable main character. And it certainly helps that all the side characters as well are just as likable and just as interesting as Kenshin, if not more. But yeah, I think, Kenshin is another great addition to this list. And as a Roni Kenshin fan, I ain't disappointed with number 10. I think that's perfectly fine. Definitely in the top 15 for sure. Okay, at number 9, we have Shinji from Evangelion. Now, obviously, this was another series I knew was going to be on this list, because you cannot talk about the goats of anime without mentioning Evangelion. But do I think Shinji should be at number 9? I will say no. I think if there had to be a character, or rather, I'm thinking 2 characters specifically from Evangelion that should be on this number 9 spot, it's Asuka and Rei. Because both Asuka and Rei were not only, I just think, more interesting characters in terms of the context of Evangelion as a character in the story, but also the impact that both Asuka and Rei brought onto the whole waifu tropes thing. Obviously, Asuka being the tsundere trope, Rei being the kudere trope. There are so many characters that are modeled after Asuka and Rei, it's not even funny. There's even this study that was done where apparently there is literally hundreds of characters that are modeled and inspired exactly from Ayanami Rei from Evangelion. There's even a funny name for it as well. It's the Ayanami Rei connection or something like that. Look it up though. It's super fascinating. I made a video on it years ago on the main channel, but those characters have a very long-lasting impact on the world of just how anime characters are developed in a story. And look, not to say that Shinji doesn't have its clones either. Like, of course, you know, the kind of wimpier, you know, soppier type of main character who is very powerless but manages to pull through that powerless nature to achieve great things is definitely a trope that we see in future anime characters for sure. But I just think in terms of the sheer number and the sheer cultural impact that characters like Asuka and Rei brought onto the greater world of anime, I think they should be at this number 9 spot rather than Shinji personally. Okay, number 8 is probably another obvious answer, Usagi from Sailor Moon, which, look, I get why they put Usagi in the top 10 because, you know, you can't have a greatest anime of all time conversation without mentioning Sailor Moon. The impact that Sailor Moon brought onto especially the world of shoujo anime and manga is like unprecedented. Like it is unfathomably large, and regardless of whether you enjoy or read or consume shoujo material in the anime and manga world is out of the question because it really did exceed outside of the shoujo realm as well, especially in the late 90s when the whole kind of shoujo and romance boom really started to pop up. But I think, you know, I like Usagi. Do I find her a little bit annoying at times? Yes. But, you know, she's obviously purposefully written that way. So I get that. She's not my favorite character in Sailor Moon, obviously. You know, Sailor Mercury fans, let's go. But, you know, I can't argue with this position because, again, this is another one of those obvious contenders for the GOATs of anime. So, you know, I'll let this slide. At number 7, we have Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z, which, yes, abso-fucking-lutely, he is easily the most interesting and diverse character in the Dragon Ball Z fandom, and he's my favorite character. I fucking love Vegeta. Is there a single person who watched or knows anything about Dragon Ball Z that doesn't like Vegeta? Let's be real. Like, I would say the only L he took was that he married Bulma, but other than that, well, I mean, I'm just a Bulma hater, so it's whatever. But Vegeta for sure, and we can't, again, another contender, we can't talk about the GOATs of anime without mentioning Dragon Ball Z and the massive cultural impact Dragon Ball Z brought, not just, again, onto anime and manga, but just the wider storytelling style in general, and especially the art style of Toriyama Akira just being so incredibly influential in the world of anime and manga. You can't not talk about it. And Vegeta here, I'm totally happy with it. He is by far the most interesting character in Dragon Ball Z. By far goes through the best, I guess, like character development in Dragon Ball Z as well. And, you know, I would honestly put, you know, characters like Frieza and Cell and you know, and even Boo as well, honestly. Like I would put those characters here in the same position as Vegeta, but I'm happy that, you know, IGN decided to put my favorite character on there, so that's always a plus, isn't it? Okay, number 5 is Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop. Do I see, this is hard because obviously talking any ill will about Cowboy Bebop just gets the Cowboy Bebop fans seething, but so I'm going to try and convey my words in the best way that I possibly can. But or rather, I'm actually glad that IGN is doing this for me because I was going to mention Lupin III, because I'm going to be straight up honest with you guys. Spike Spiegel, in a lot of ways, is just a Lupin III clone when it comes to the type of character trope he falls under. Like, it is very, very obvious that the creators of Cowboy Bebop looked at series like Lupin III and took that as a massive inspiration for Cowboy Bebop. Like, Lupin III, Cowboy Bebop in a lot of ways is Lupin III in space. As both a Lupin III and Cowboy Bebop fan, I totally have nothing wrong with that. I fucking adore... Let me just preface this by saying I fucking love Cowboy Bebop. It's a fantastic show. Yes, it is like overrated and the obvious pick, but Cowboy Bebop is an incredible show, and especially when it came out, it was insanely revolutionary. And what is kind of interesting about the long-standing legacy of Cowboy Bebop is that the legacy it left as a series made more of a cultural splash in the West than it did in Japan. Like, if you come to Japan and you talk to Japanese people, you talk to especially anime fans in Japan, it is actually surprising how many people have never heard of Cowboy Bebop, which is fascinating. I feel this is one of the few series where there are more fans outside of Japan than there are in Japan, just based on the frequency of when you will hear it in a anime-centric, centered conversation. I think deserves all the praise that it can get, and Spike is a great character, but I would not put him over Lupin. I'm sorry. I just on principle of Spike being heavily inspired by Lupin as a character, I think Lupin should be above Spike, but I'm not upset at Spike being on this list either. Okay, number 5, another Dragon Ball character, we have Goku, which, you know what? Again, I'm not upset about. You're probably thinking, oh my god, again, this is such an obvious pick. They're just going through all the popular shows, but hey, like, Goku was an incredibly influential character and just, definitely helped perpetuate just Dragon Ball franchise in general, especially in Japan. A lot of people love Goku here. It's not just the West, it's not just the Dragon Ball fans online. Like, even in Japan, there are so many Dragon Ball fans. There are so many Goku fans, and it's undeniable how much of an impact Goku brought onto the Dragon Ball Z fandom and just the entire anime fandom in general. So I have nothing to say on this. Number 5, valid, because I legitimately thought Goku was going to be a number 1. Like, to be completely honest with you, before going into this video, I thought for sure Goku was going to be a number 1, but him being in the top 5, you know what? I have no qualms with that. Oh my lord! IGN didn't do this. IGN didn't just make the most based opinion I've ever goddamn seen. Johan
Liebert
from Monster. Hell the fuck yeah. If you have never seen Monster, please do yourself a favor. It is incredibly good. And a big reason why Monster is such an impactful show to read or watch is because of this motherfucker. This evil motherfucker. When I say Johan is quite possibly the greatest villain ever written in manga and anime, that is not an over-exaggeration whatsoever. And I think every Monster fan can agree with me on this. Johan is an incredibly well-written character. If we're talking about in terms of like the moral reasons or like the backstories of what makes a character evil, I think he's kind of like the polar opposite of Dio, in the sense that Dio is great as a villain because he has no rhyme or reason. He's just an evil motherfucker. Johan, on the other hand, has a lot of reasons, and that's what makes him a great villain. I'm actually kind of happy that Johan was put here above characters like Light, for instance, and I think it's even mentioned here as well. Yeah, like even IGN here compares Johan to Light from Death Note, and I think that's a valid opinion as well, because there are a lot of aspects of Light as a character that are, I would say, intentionally or unintentionally, definitely took some inspiration from characters like Johan. And just the way that Johan, throughout the series, can just manipulate not only the characters in the show, but also you as the reader or watcher to like kind of fall into his like mind games and fall into his schemes without you even realizing it. Like, by the time you realize you have fallen into his scheme as a reader, it's already too late. And that's what makes him such a terrifying antagonist, rather. And I'm so glad. He absolutely deserves to be in the top 10 here. And at number 4, hey, I ain't complaining, dog. Monster Mention just made me happy. I'm so glad that it remembered to put Johan on here. Let's figure out what the top 3 is. Okay, Naruto. It was a given. I think the thing with Naruto that just makes him the most like memorable characters and the character that like lives through the legacies is just the fact that I think, again, Naruto was just such a massive gateway anime for a lot of people, both in Japan and overseas. And God, when Naruto first came out, the number of people who were doing Naruto runs around me, it was to an infuriating level. Obviously, people aren't really doing it now because people understand like the cringe aspect of it. But man, when Naruto came out, God, you would have caught your grandma during the Naruto run at one point. And as much as I'm not a massive fan of Naruto in any way, I cannot deny the intense impact Naruto as a character and as a series brought to the world of anime. So you know what? I'm not upset with Naruto number 3. I'm actually not. Again, it's kind of this weird position for me where like a character that I don't necessarily have an attachment to being so high up on a list of this kind. When you think about it, you can't deny the legacy that Naruto as a character and as a franchise brought. So, hey, you know what? At least Kakashi's on the list. I'm happy with that. At the runner-up, we have Edward Elric from Full Metal Alchemist. How do I say this without getting cancelled? I like Edward as a character. I like Full Metal Alchemist as a series. Do I think he is the most memorable main character in Shonen? No. Probably because there are just so many characters that are very similar to Edward as a character. You know, I mentioned like Tanjiro, for example, or like Gon, for example, who are kind of in the same like level of like ditzy meets serious when shit gets serious type of main character. You know, like they have the fun, lovable, jokey types of moments, but they also have like the serious, like time to fucking power up and cause some shit moments. So I think because there is just so many characters who are like that, it is really difficult to pinpoint one character that is like that. Although I will say, unlike characters like Gon or Tanjiro especially, I think Edward definitely has a lot more of an interesting dynamic when it comes to the reason why he is the character at that point in the story. I think as a character, he makes so much more sense at that point in time to act and say and do the things that he does, which I think is a really, really strong point for just Full Metal Alchemist in general. I think because every single character in that series manages to do that pretty goddamn well. And hey, that's the reason why a lot of people think Full Metal Alchemist is the greatest anime ever created. Do I necessarily agree with that? Not necessarily, but I thoroughly enjoy Full Metal Alchemist. It is a fantastic show. Made me cry a few times, made me shit my pants a few times. It just is the best all-rounder when it comes to anime that you can really recommend to anyone. And, you know, Edward, I would honestly put in my top 10. If I had to pick any character that, again, fits into that, like, kind of category of anime protagonists, I would most likely put Edward there. I don't disagree with this list, but now I'm curious, right? We have Goku. We have Naruto. We haven't seen a single Bleach character yet, which is insane. Now we have Edward here. Who's at number 1? Of course. I can't hate this. I really can't. Luffy, I think, out of your standard shonen protagonists out there, is definitely the most memorable. Is he the most interesting main protagonist to a shonen series? Probably not, but he is definitely the most memorable because, again, he doesn't fall into that samey type of category that characters like Edward and Tanjiro and like Deku and like Shinji and like all those characters kind of fall into, because there is really no main character like Luffy. Because while characters like Tanjiro and Gon and Edward have their moments of being goofy, funny, and being goofy, silly, Luffy definitely falls more into the majority of the time him just being a fucking goofball. I think that's what makes his dynamic with the way that the story plays out so interesting, because he is a goofball like 80-90% of the time that you see him in the manga. The 10% of the time when he does become serious becomes like an oh shit moment where now you're really paying attention. And when he gets serious, that motherfucker gets serious. And again, because of the nature of his devil fruit powers, he has some of the coolest transformations in anime. He has, you know, some of the most memorable attacks, and him just as a character is just so lovable. Like, you can't, it's really difficult to hate Luffy. You know what I mean? Like, hating Luffy is like just hating fun, and who hates having fun? And there is no denying, once again, the insane legacy that One Piece as a series is going to give to just the world of anime. And I'm really like interested to see what the aftermath of One Piece ending is going to be like in the wider world of anime. Like, is it really going to be like a post-apocalyptic fallout of just now anime is just not as good as it used to be type of thing, or are we going to see something that is born out of those ashes? It's really going to be interesting to see. But Luffy being number one, that wasn't a surprise. Again, what is a surprise, however, is just like the number of, I guess, characters that IGN decided to take out of the conversation for some reason. Like, I'm really surprised there hasn't been a single Bleach character. I'm really surprised there hasn't been, like, you know, as much as I don't agree with them putting this on this list if they ever decided to, like, a My Hero Academia character. And again, like, just personally speaking, I think, you know, you should have put Kenshiro from Fist of the North Star on here. Also, I didn't see any sports anime characters on here. Like, what about Tsubasa from Captain Tsubasa? Like, he is an incredibly influential character. And if we're going even further back, like, what about, like, any character, like, main character from Ashita no Joe? Like, he inspired so many sports series and just so many of those kinds of, like, hardcore impact characters. And if we're going on, like, a really far spectrum of just absolutely dog shit insane type of characters, like, I think characters like Hanma Yujiro should be up there. Like, he is incredibly memorable character, and there is not really a character like him. But again, at the end of the day, this is all just personal preference, and there's a reason why you don't often see lists like this that are 100% agreeable, because it is almost an impossible, you know, question to fill in the shoes of. So, you know what, I will give applause to IGN, although some of the editions were just completely fucking whacked out. I think in general, this was an interesting list, and I think it's a great list to not get the anime fans too pissed off about it. I thought it was pretty well rounded with good reasoning and good placements. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I gave you my thoughts. Now give me your thoughts. I'd love to know. But yeah, this was a mega long video. I apologize for that. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, and thanks for watching. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to smack my face right here. Subscribe to the channel. Let's keep making big channel number go bigger. Over here next to my head is a couple more videos you can check out if you enjoyed this one, and the links to my social media, as well as my Patreon to support me directly. And hey, nonsense.jp, check the clothing line out. We're going to come out with some dope shit. I know you're going to love it. Links in the description, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.